I love the media and I love being able to travel and cover these important stories, especially as it relates to climate and the environment. But as a mom, there was just something in me that said, let's see what else is out there. That's where I found PR.
In this episode, you'll get to know Ashley Bernardi, the media mama, and you'll hear the story of how overcoming trauma led her to build a fulfilling and flexible business in media relations. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is My Success Show. Welcome back, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show. This is where I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my life's journey, and I'm looking for universal principles of success to help both you succeed and my kids succeed. In case it's your first time here, I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've reached millions of people and helped them be successful through my online courses, particularly on LinkedIn Learning. With this show, I wanted to create something a little different, something lasting, a legacy to help my family succeed. But when I started building it, I thought, oh, you'd also enjoy learning along with them. So as you listen to today's episode, I'd like you to do one thing. Look for something you can do, an action you can take this week to make my guest success story a part of your success story. And you're going to want to do that with today's guest. I've known her for a while, and I'm really excited to share her story with you. Ashley Bernardi is a former journalist and network television producer with credits that include The Early Show on CBS News and Energy Now on Bloomberg. She's the founder of Nardi Media, a nationally renowned full-service media relations and training firm. Ashley's a frequent speaker on the topics of media relations, training, and communications. She also co-hosts the award-winning podcast, Two Girls Talking. Ashley's first book is Authentic Power, Give Yourself Permission to Feel, and she lives in Northern Virginia with her husband, 3 daughters, and 2 cats. Ashley, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Dave. I'm so excited to be here with you today. What an honor. We're going to have so much fun.
Yeah, it's fun to reconnect. You did some work for me. I really was impressed with the work you did to help publicize my book, and I thought this would be a really entertaining interview. So, first of all, I always like to ask, where are you at right now? Where are you located for this interview?
I'm right outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia.
Oh, that's a beautiful area.
Yes, so much green in the springtime. I've lived here for a long time now. It's where I have my family, and also extended family.
All right. So I like to start this interview. We're going to get into your career story and also the things that you teach and you've learned. I always like to start with the fun place, which is the question that we all got asked when we were young. What did you want to be when you grew up? Now, I'm going to put a qualifier on that and say, let's talk about it more in terms of maybe your teenage years when you were wanting to be something other than just the President of the United States or an astronaut.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting because I am one of those people that am doing what I had dreamed of doing as a kid. And let me just paint the picture. So as a kid, growing up in the 80s, I remember my dad would give me his VHS camcorder. And, those were like super fancy back then.
Yeah, and huge.
And huge. I mean, it would like sit on your shoulder, right? And had the VHS tape in it that you would record. And he would let me take it and just create my own newscast. I was writing scripts at age 8 and 9 and 10. I was producing our family news and I was writing our family newspapers, and I would make my sister the producer. I would anchor and I would write. She would sometimes be my camera person. So my first earliest memories are of me broadcasting to the world. And so it's funny how, my career, of course, kind of snowballed into that. And you asked about high school. I was anchoring my high school's newscast. In college, I was an award-winning editor for my college newspaper. And I've always known, it's been intuitively this huge piece of me, this writing, broadcasting, news, connection with others as a way, like sharing news as a way to connect with others, has truly been in my bones from as early as I can remember.
That's really interesting because I was doing very similar things at that age as well. But I thought I was going to be a movie director. I wanted to be Steven Spielberg. But I had the VHS camera, I had the scripts to get people out and stuff like that. So for you, it started very early. Where did that come from? Was there something that you saw or someone that you admired on maybe on TV or something like that? Where did that desire start?
Yeah, it was in my home. So I am the daughter of an Army colonel and a former professional ballet dancer. And she started her own company, a dance school, and it was a thriving school here in the Northern Virginia region. And so I was immersed in the performing arts from birth. So I was always giving these amazing opportunities to be on a stage. And I think that easily transformed to being behind an anchor desk and broadcasting. And I learned that dancing was a beautiful way of expressing myself, but the power of words, writing, and the spoken language was really where my passion lied. So my upbringing gave me the confidence to speak on a stage, to perform, to dance, but I took it further because my interest was really in communicating and broadcasting.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I guess that explains why we get along so well, because I've got a lot of that same bug in me. So where did you go to college?
So I went to Radford University and studied media studies and journalism. And there I was very involved in the school newspaper. I was an editor of the opinion section. But in addition to that, I was also very involved in the school in general. I was president of my sorority. Our philanthropy was Special Olympics, so we were very involved with that. I have always been, in going back from college even to high school, and even before that, I always feel like leadership and directing was a part of my DNA. I think probably in that my mother and they were both bosses and leaders in their own industries, dad being the Army colonel, mom being the CEO director of her dance company. So that leadership piece has always followed me. And very naturally, when I ran for office in high school, I was elected secretary of my class, ran for president of my sorority, elected president of my sorority. So now where I am, all these years later, 20 years after college, it's a natural fit that I'm the CEO of my own company and in many ways the CEO of my own life too.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pause for a second because I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a listener. And I'm hearing this story and I'm thinking, man, that all sounds like smooth sailing. That all sounds like it was pretty easy for you. I know that you've dealt with some pretty difficult things in your life. Did you experience that during those college years? Was there adversity that you had to face there? Moments that didn't go the way you wanted them to?
Yeah, I think there was plenty of adversity in college. Actually, I mean, we could go back to just my childhood where, if you like, because that's really where my adversity started. So I just painted a really pretty picture of, oh, Ashley, loved doing this her whole life and this success followed her. But it did not look like that at all, as are usually anyone's stories. And it actually had to do with a traumatic childhood experience that left me reeling until probably I didn't even address it until my mid-30s. So if you want me, I can start there because that takes through high school and college and beyond.
Yeah, please. If you're comfortable sharing that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I had a wonderful family growing up. My father, he traveled a lot being an Army colonel. Of course, he was overseas a lot. I have a little sister and I had a beautiful upbringing. I had loving grandparents, loving family, and everything was going well for 11-year-old, 6th grade Ashley, who loved dance, loved writing, loved reading. And there was one night where we were getting ready for bed and my dad was really tired and we had just finished watching a movie and he was like, I'm going to go upstairs. And we are like, okay. So then, my mom started getting my sister, who was 9 at the time, and I ready for bed. And I was going upstairs. I went to kiss him goodnight and I said, I love you, Dad. He said, I love you too. Gave him a hug. And then I put myself to bed. My mom came to give me a kiss. And a couple moments later, we could hear like some moaning coming from my parents' bedroom, and my mom ran in and just started screaming, and I knew that it was an emergency. And so at the time, this was in the 90s, we had no cell phones. So where we had a phone was in my dad's office downstairs. So I ran downstairs and called 911, 11 years old, and was like, something's wrong with my dad. And at the time, my sister had gone in to help my mom. And then I hung up the phone. 911 is on its way. And I was like, okay, what do I do next? I go get help. So I ran out to the neighbors, go to get help. Ambulance comes. Somehow I'm reunited with my sister. My mom's not there. My dad's taken in an ambulance. We're shuttled into the neighbor's car, and everyone's like, everything's going to be okay. Your dad's going to be okay. And I'm just like, wow, that was scary. You think that's a wild story. I'm going to tell all my friends at school tomorrow, because you think that. And then we get to the hospital and they bring us to this beautiful room. I'll never forget it. It was like just this beautiful room with soft lighting and all these seats. And suddenly, because I have a lot of extended family in the area, more family started coming in. And I was like, wow, why is everybody here? This is so great. I get to see aunts, uncles, and cousins. And then suddenly my mom and my dad's sister walk in, and they come, and my mom kneels down to my sister and I and said that, dad had passed away and gone to heaven. And that is like,
wow,
that's where my life course just changed. And I learned later that, my mom and sister, while I was out running around the neighborhood trying to get help, my 9-year-old sister and my mom tag team CPR on my dad. And what had resulted was that he had a sudden death heart attack and literally died, like just in their arms, right in front of all of us. That we learned that his heart was 90% blocked and that there was nothing that we could have done to save him. But of course, as an 11-year-old, in my mind, it was my fault. I didn't dial 911 fast enough. I didn't run down the stairs fast enough. I didn't get to the neighbors fast enough. And I just remember feeling I was so sad. My dad was my best friend and my playmate, but also so guilty that I didn't do enough to save his life. There was just guilt. There was grief. There was shame. I thought that to be like my father, who was a stoic, Silver Star award-winning Vietnam veteran, to just be a soldier and bury those feelings within me and carry on with life. And that's kind of what I did, honestly, Dave, for the next almost 20 years after that. Just like act like everything's okay. And I buried it deep within. I wouldn't allow myself to grieve. And it wasn't until I was in my early 30s, married and about to have another kid, did it finally start, that grief that you can't hold on to it forever. It's going to start manifesting in other ways. And that's exactly what happened.
No matter what your career is, your foundation of success begins with one thing: effective time management. And thanks to the generosity of Microsoft, you can get my entire course, Time Management Fundamentals, for free on LinkedIn Learning. Go to davegift.com to get your free access now. This is the course that millions around the world have used to become more productive and reduce stress. Everyone from Fortune 500 executives to freelancers to students. Now, it's the same coaching I've provided in person for tens of thousands of dollars per day, but you can get it for free on LinkedIn Learning. You don't need to provide anything to access it. No credit card, no email. Just go to davegift.com and start learning. Thank you so much, Microsoft and LinkedIn Learning, for your partnership. davegift.com. So what was it that kept you from experiencing that grief? Why was it buried for so long for you?
I think that's a really great question. It's not one that I get asked. I think there's probably many factors after I've been through a lot of exploration on this topic. I think first and foremost, being raised in a military family, that stoicism, children are to be seen and not heard. Also, what I was starting to feel was really freaking scary. And I held on to that shame. Like, I truly thought it was my fault that my dad died. I felt like I wanted to harbor that so as not to perhaps hurt my mom and sister. And there's also a factor of just childhood trauma in and of itself and PTSD. which later in life I was diagnosed with as a result of this. So I think that there's many factors, both psychological and also just what was going on in the home that made me bury it. And I think the bottom line is that I just felt safer burying it. And I've learned that that's not anything that you should do where I am now in my life.
Yeah, but I think that's very common. I mean, I've experienced that in different losses that I've experienced. I think we all have that tendency to look and say, what was our fault? What could we have done to prevent this? So what was the moment? Do you remember the moment or where you were or what caused you to suddenly start to experience this grief? What was the catalyst for it?
Oh, absolutely. So, and this is exactly what I write about in my book. I was going on at warp speed, Dave. And I think you mentioned something earlier that's super important. I didn't stop. And that's a very important note in my story, is that I didn't allow myself to stop. That's why I had no problem in high school and in college saying, oh, sure, I'll take leadership of this and this and this and this and this and this. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, you're so busy. You're so busy. Ashley's always so busy. And even when I was a TV producer in New York, busy, 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 traveling the world, covering breaking news stories on horrible stories, trauma, death. And the irony is not lost on me that the stories I was covering was most likely an opportunity for me to not look at my own trauma. And so it wasn't until I was married and had 2 children at the time, it's when I became very mysteriously ill with very unsettling symptoms of brain fog, muscle pain, hand and body numbness. And then I got pregnant. The symptoms kind of went quiet because I've learned that when you're pregnant, your immune system goes quiet and doesn't really bother you anymore. So then I delivered my 3rd baby, and that was it. Suddenly, I had the same symptoms that I had experienced mildly before just came back. And I mean, it was chronic migraines where I couldn't even see, flashing in my vision all day long, vertigo, dizzy spells, fainting spells where ambulance had to be called on me a couple times at my house. And no one could figure out what was wrong with me. I had so many doctors look at me and say, oh, she's just a stressed out mom of 3 kids. I can't tell you how many times I was written off by doctors telling me I had to go. It was really unfortunate. At that time, though, I was put in a mental health facility, a part-time hospitalization program for mental health, because I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. And I knew in my heart that was not the cause. I was like, I am depressed because I feel like I have the flu every single day. And I can't get up. I can't get out of bed. I can't see. I can't move my body. I can't even begin to describe how horrific the pain was in every single part of my body. And I couldn't even care for my kids. So, I go through this mental health program for 8 weeks. I just remember one day coming home after a doctor's visit, and my husband had taken the girls to the parents' house because I had just gotten home from the hospital, and I was like, I don't want them to see me like this. I'm so sick. And I fell asleep, and I woke up the next day and no one was in the house. And for the first time in probably 20 years since my dad died, I was all alone in my grief for my health. And I just started sobbing. And what I realized was, when I was sobbing, it was like guttural cries. I was like, why do I miss my dad so much too? I get like teary eyed talking about it. And that was truly also at the first time that, yes, I was grieving for my health, but at the same time, I was grieving for my father too, 20 years later, because it was unaddressed grief. And so it just came pouring out, and it didn't stop from there. And I can't say it was like an uncomfortable feeling, but after the fact, it started to feel a little bit better. I still had symptoms, but I felt hope. I felt like this glimmer of hope that I hadn't felt in a really long time, since I had physically become so ill. And it was later revealed through one more doctor that my husband was like, Ashley, let's just try one more doctor, recommended by his mom. And I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. So from there, in this new discovery of, okay, it's okay to feel Ashley, it's okay to feel your feelings. Like now you're moving through this process of grief for your dad and for your health. Simultaneously, I began my treatment for Lyme disease. In my case, I was so far gone. Like I had brain scans that showed encephalitis in my brain. I had to get a PICC line, so from my arm to my heart with the highest dose of antibiotics available in the medical world. And they put me on the antibiotics for 8 weeks. I had to move in with my in-laws because I had a baby. I could not lift anything, I think heavier than 15, 20 pounds, and just began the healing process. And for the first time in my life, was pretty still and started doing the spiritual and deeper work needed to kind of excavate the grief that had been sitting in me for 20 years.
Wow, that's remarkable. And I know that you now talk about that and you help people with that by sharing your experience. So thank you for sharing that here with us. So with all of this going on, I mean, you have a very demanding career, being in media, that sort of thing. That's a pretty stressful job in and of itself. So how are you managing that in the midst of all of this?
Yes, the media is a stressful career. And there was actually a point in time before I got sick. I was living in New York City. I was a booker for a national TV show, booker and producer, and had received a job offer to go and produce an energy and environmental show in DC. And I said, yes, that sounds amazing. It was for a digital platform. And I knew that's where the media was headed, was just all digital, which is look where it is now. So I ended up in DC. That's where I met my husband, and we were married, had our first baby. And then I was still traveling. I was traveling the world. And when we found out after a good 4-year run that our show was canceled, I said, I don't know if I can do this travel anymore like I have been. I love the media and I love being able to travel and cover these important stories, especially as it relates to climate and the environment. But as a mom, that there was just something in me that said, let's see what else is out there. That's where I found PR. And I had known a lot of other journalists who kind of tired of the travel and the media and just the being at what they were tired of. And this is what I grew tired of, is the mercy of the breaking news cycle.
I've experienced that as well. And I tried to play the game for a while and I just quit. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's too stressful.
You're right. It's so stressful. So I said, I'm going to try PR. So I started at a small PR firm. And what I loved about it was that I could still craft stories and pitches that were tailored to the news cycle, but I didn't have to work all night to actually produce the news, right? So I could package up our clients and have them positioned as experts to speak on topics in the news, which I was really good at because I had done it for so long. And I found that I loved it. Like within 3 months of working in PR, I was doing things that no one else at the firm had done before. I was booking the Today Show. I was booking MSNBC. And I got curious, like, could I do this on my own? And I remember thinking that. And so when I got pregnant with my second daughter, I had long conversations with my husband. I knew I didn't want to go back to this particular company. One, because it was like just a commute from our home and there was a lot of in-office hours. I wouldn't get home until 7:00 every night. And I was like, Mike, my husband, I think I can do this. I can do it from home. And it was really scary. So I ended up resigning when I delivered Kate, my second child. Because of the non-compete, I was just like, I'm just going to go back to dabbling in freelance. So that's where I ended up working at the Washington Post, which I loved. I got to help produce and book for the Washington Post live events. And I also did some marketing for my mom's dance company and helping get them get booked on TV. And so I did that for about a year while writing a business plan. And then it was like end of 2014, I started having people who just I knew from the industry come to me and say, hey, are you doing any PR these days? And I was like, well, I could. So I'll never forget. It's our good friend, Ron Friedman. He was my first real big, like just client. And he came to me and said, my book already launched. I don't think we hit the mark on broadcast. What can you do? And I said, well, let me see what I can do. And I gave it a shot. And within 3 months, I had Ron on over 50 TV, radio, and podcast placements. And so that was like, boom, Ashley can do this. Nardi Media. Like, I think I needed that like my own personal like wins to carry me with the confidence. And I did it. And that's where the company started just growing, and I have not looked back. And when I got sick in 2016, I had one other person working for me, and I was able to hand a lot of things off to her, but I didn't really tell anyone. Again, the kind of like the bearing of the trauma started coming back. I was like, nobody will know that I'm sick. And according to like the professional world, Ashley is fine. And so I really dealt with it on my own. That did give me space to have some spiritual and personal exploration there. And then I finally started speaking out about it. And I found that once I started talking about how I was feeling, I connected even more with people. And I was like, oh, I can share like my personal things in the workplace. Like, this is weird. And, clients were concerned. And when I started sharing my story, even in my book, everyone's like, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so vulnerable and so real and so authentic. So that's kind of where the career wove in with while I was sick. I sometimes worked from bed. I sometimes didn't. I sometimes handed things off to the people that I hired.
The part that I like about that is, as someone who's coached many business owners, the hardest thing that they have to do is to learn to hand it off and trust someone else to take care of things. It's essential to success. And what it sounded to me is that you had to do it. The illness, the psychological trauma that you were dealing with created a situation where you had to do it. So it actually was a silver lining in this, that it forced you to create a more viable business that wasn't completely dependent on Ashley to succeed.
That has been one of my greatest business lessons since launching my company too. And I think a lot of CEOs and leaders can relate to this, Dave, in that like, oh, I've got to do all the work myself. Like, no one can do it as good as me. But when you are stopped in the tracks, literally, I had no choice but to stop. And now I do that still, Dave. And here I am almost 10 years later. You better believe I hand things off to people now. And if I need a personal day, I'm out of the office. I'm taking it and I'm going to hand it off to people. And before this health crisis, I would have never thought to do that. Never thought to do that.
Why? Why wouldn't you have considered to do that?
My mindset, well, I have a lot of thoughts, but the first one is that, well, why would I slow down? I don't want to slow down because then I have to address what's going on inside me. So that's number one. Number two, I had the mentality that like, no one's going to do it as good as me. And I still truly suffer from that, to be completely vulnerable as a CEO and leader. And I'm like curious if you ever feel that too.
So in my book, The Focus Business, I talk about how one of the things that keeps a business owner tied to their business is that belief that no one can do it as well as you can. And the funny thing about it is that's true. For most business owners, you are more passionate, you are more dedicated, you have more experience. But in this case, the truth doesn't set you free. It shackles you to your business. And great businesses aren't dependent on the founder or the business owner to run. So it's something where you have to say, even if I could do it better than someone else, I need to train them to learn how to do it as well as I can. That's the key, is saying they don't, but I've got to empower them to do it.
That is right. And that has been one of the greatest learnings in my business, is teaching myself how to delegate to other people. And most importantly, training people, training my way. I once had a friend tell me, Ashley, you're right. Like what you said, Dave, no one's going to be able to do it as good as you, but they can do it 90% as good. And then you can get them that far, then you can take things off your plate. And that is what I've been teaching myself how to do.
Yeah, well, good for you to do that. Let's talk about the business for just a moment. Who are the clients that you typically work with? What's the sweet spot for you?
Yeah, so I love working with book authors. And the reason is that when I was a network TV producer, I loved always booking book authors on my show, especially nonfiction authors. Why? Because they had something new and interesting, often innovative to say. They were thought leaders in their industry. And you could tie them to comment on the news too. So I found that authors and books were my love. And I've also expanded to include working with mission-driven nonprofit organizations and companies, whether it's, focusing on military. I love working with military nonprofits, given my background as a military daughter. Nonprofits focused on environment, climate change, or maternal and infant health. So, our values are really aligned with mission-driven thought leaders and companies and organizations. And I always say that I'm very selective with the clients that we take on too. If I wouldn't read your book for pleasure, I probably can't take you on as a publicist. And so that's why we like to keep the team small and lean for one of the many reasons. That's one reason. But also just aligned with what Ashley is personally interested in too. So books, health, wellness, science, parenting, and leadership are my sweet spot.
So it's interesting how you talk about how you're selective with the clients that you work with. I'm remembering, so I grew up, my father was a radio talk show host, and he would sometimes have to advertise for things. And I remember him saying that he had a rule that he wouldn't advertise for a product that he didn't actually like and enjoy. I think that's a critical thing. If you're going to promote someone else, if you're going to sell something, you really need to love it and be passionate about it. Because if you're not passionate about it, who is going to be?
That's right, Dave. I say this all the time because what I tell, especially authors, first and foremost, as an author, you're your greatest cheerleader. You're your greatest secret weapon. But then the next person is your publicist and is your media, your communications person. And if they can't personally get behind you and sell your brand, they're not going to be able to get anybody else excited. So that's why I don't take on all books, but I'll take on the ones that I'm like, yes, I can't wait to rip this book open and read the pages. And my team is very aligned with our values too. Most of us are moms that are working from home, and that's like another value of the company. And when I figured out I could do PR, I figured out I could easily do it from home. I don't need to have an office, which cuts down on commute time. So we can spend more times with our family doing the meaningful work that we do here at Nardi Media. So there's just, you got to love it. Or you can't promote it. That's just the value here.
Yeah. You mentioned your team. How large is your team right now?
So it's me, a managing director, and then I have 4 media strategists. And then I just hired a social media person just part-time to help me with social media. And I have an ops manager too. So we're lean, but we've definitely grown. It started with just me and then one other person. And then over the years, what seems to be really cool is that companies or authors will come back to me and say, hey, I want to work with you and you're this person on your team. And I'm like, great. So I love being able to provide those opportunities for career growth and expansion to the folks on my team as well. And like I said, most all of them are moms, which is really cool. A lot of moms who have either left TV. I have moms that were at the Today Show and are with me now, or have worked at a major publisher and now they're here with Nardi Media working. It's pretty great.
Okay, so let's dive into that just a little bit. You're a mom who's successful. You've got moms working on your team. What approach do you need to take? What needs to be different to help a working mom succeed in a work environment like this?
Oh my gosh. Thank you for asking that question. Because truly, I wanted to create a company that gave moms flexibility and freedom. And this, Dave, you are a parent, you've got kids, and it's very unpredictable being a parent. You never know when you're going to get a call from school or when you need to show up for the poetry slam or the after school activity or help here, but also just be a presence in your child's life and school community. And I knew that working in an office at a PR firm in DC was no longer aligned with my values. I wanted to do good work with good clients and also be a present mom. And that was a value that was very important to me. So how can companies support moms, give them the flexibility, let them work from home. If they can truly do their job from home, I actually work harder at home than I ever did in an office. There's more creativity, there's more flexibility. I can walk outside and take a walk while I'm on a call. So I would say give them the flexibility and the creativity to create a customized schedule and workflow that flows with their work-life integration. I don't like calling it work-life balance because I truly don't believe in that. It's integration. It's sometimes maybe taking a break in the afternoon to go have lunch with a child. And then maybe that means later, while my child is at her gymnastics, I'm just going to finish up some work emails. And so it's that creating that flexibility as opposed to that office 9 to 5, and then you're home and then you're with your family. So I've created an environment where if my team needs to go and take someone to a doctor's appointment or to do something, it's just like, great, we celebrate that. We'll cover for you. We've got you. We're a team. And then they'll come back and finish their work on their time, when it works for them. So I would say freedom, flexibility, and creativity are the three things that I would tell anyone else who wants to support working moms.
Those are great principles. And I appreciate you're talking about from the standpoint of moms. Yeah, my perspective is it's also dads. We also need that ability to take care of our family as well. And I'm grateful that I've been able to create my own career where I have that flexibility. But it's weird. There was that period of time when the pandemic happened and everybody worked from home, and it was like, oh, we're going to give everybody flexibility. And now it's swinging back the other way. And it's like, no, we can still, like you said, you work harder when you work from home. That's the secret to this. And yet I feel like too many people are trying to exert control and bring people back into the workplace when they probably will get better results when people are working from home.
And I can speak to that as a case study. 2020 was Nardi Media's most profitable year. We were all home. I wasn't out like in TV studios or doing lunch meetings. I was just grinding away, working with our clients. And also, thankfully, I was one of the parents that had support from the grandparents here, so I could work. I think back and I say, well, no mistake, that was my most profitable year. Everybody was here at home and we were doing an amazing job. We were doing great work. So yeah, I think I am personally more productive, and I know my team is personally more productive. I have people ask me, oh, do you have an office? Are you ever going to open an office? No, that's not me. That's not our values. That's not how we work. We are a small women-run business that supports working parents, and working parents are most supported when they're working from home if they want to be. That's what I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me to another question, which is, okay, yes, you work harder when you're working from home. The other side of that, though, is that it's harder to create separation when you're working from home. So let's talk about that for a moment, which is, what are you doing? What has worked and maybe what hasn't worked to maintain that boundary between work and home?
Yeah, I love that. Let me start with what doesn't work, because I know very clearly what doesn't. Is when you get into a flow. I think when you're at home, I could like work for like 4 straight hours without any breaks and then be like, oh my God, I forgot my lunch, right? Because there's nobody else in the office and you're on Slack or you're just working from your computer. So what I do instead is I'll do I'm sure you've heard of the Pomodoro technique, or I'll just like set a timer and work on one task on my list, like pitching this client, and I'll set it for an hour or I'll set it for 35 minutes. And then I take a break. And I always take a break, stretch my body, get outside, I get on walks. And something else that helps break it up when you are working at home is getting outside as you can. So I'm a big proponent of walking while I'm talking. I'm actually more creative when I am walking. So if I'm on a team call, or sometimes it's even if it's a client call or a new business call, I'll say, hey, I'd love to see you on Zoom. I'm also great on the phone. I love walking and talking. That's actually where I'm my most creative. If you'd like to walk and talk with me, join me. So I give folks an option for that. And then, I'm getting in my walk outside, and that way I'm not just married to the desk all day. The other thing that helps with the separation is I do have my own office, which is huge, because I find that when I bring my laptop up to the family room with the kids around, I just end up getting frustrated, and it's no fault to them. It's because I've put myself in the home environment trying to work, and that does not work. So I have my office here where if I work now, I am in my office. Unless it's sometimes I do go up because there's more sunlight. I like to be by the window, but for the most part, I am in my office to separate work from family life because I've tried to mesh that before and it's just everyone is talking to you. You're trying to concentrate on work and you're getting frustrated at your family and it's not their fault. So if you can create your own space, even if it's in a small desk in your bedroom, my sister works from home. They actually turned a closet area into a cute little office. There's all these ways that you can be creative with just like having your work space, and sitting there means you're working, and then getting up means you're not working and you shouldn't be. So this has been something I've experimented it with many, many years. I'm curious what you do, Dave, because I'm like, I always would like to know what's working for other folks who work from home.
Well, certainly having an office that's separated from everything else. I mean, my office is on the top floor, and one of the things that I see happen very often, which is not conducive to productivity and that boundary, is the office is right next to the front door of the house. If you have the ability to separate it somewhere else, you're going to have more ability to focus. And then, there's the physical boundary, but then there's also the calendar, the schedule boundary that says, here is the line. I call it the finish line. Here is the line I will not cross. Especially with children when they move past, the really young stage, the toddler stage, they start to recognize the boundary. And if you respect it, if you say, all right, I've made the commitment that I'm going to stop work at 4 or 5 or 6, whatever the number is. But at that point, then I'll be dad, then I'll be mom, and I'll give you 100% of my attention. Then they respect the boundary as well because they come to count on it.
That's right. You bring up a really good point of those boundaries around time. I actually form those at work. So here's one that I've had since the kids have been in school. And I love doing this. At 3:30 every day, I don't take any calls between 3:30 and 4 because I like to go to the bus stop and pick my girls up at the bus. It means a lot to me that they see me or their dad, but mostly it's me because he works downtown. They see me get off the bus. I have some time with them to ask them about their day. I help them get their snack and get settled in. And if I need to go back to work for a little bit, I do. But I have that 30 minutes every day just to collect them and greet them. And that means the world to me. And I'd like to think that years to come that they'll remember seeing their mom's face every day at the bus stop. I didn't always get that with my parents, my dad being gone a lot and then passing away, and then my mom working at her business. So we often had nannies at the bus stop picking us up. And it means a lot to me. And I know this is a luxury that's not afforded to all parents, but because I've been able to create that freedom and flexibility, it's something that's a non-negotiable in my schedule.
I think that's beautiful that you've set that up, Ashley. And thank you for being an advocate for creating that kind of, I know you don't like the word balance. I use the word balance more like a surfer, right? Keeping everything in balance.
Yeah, I like that. That works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for being an advocate for that kind of balance and making time for the people who are most important to you. So to kind of wrap this up, I like to ask, where do you see the future? We've talked about the past and how you got here. What do you see 5 years out for you and for Nardi Media?
Thank you for asking that. I truly see us supporting more incredible authors, launching their books, sharing their message to the world. I recently launched Nardi Media Academy, which is where I teach people how to be their own best publicist through mindset, media training, and teaching them how to write craft pitches and the art of pitching. So I'm hoping to expand that program as well so I can serve more people, especially people who are not looking to hire a full service PR firm. And they're just like, hey, I'm just getting started on my journey and I really want to feel empowered to do it myself. So I'm hoping to serve more people in that way in the future and just be a resource for trends in the media. And I'm always like, oh, maybe I'll go back and host a TV show one day. I don't know, like that. There's certainly an opportunity for more broadcasting in my future as well, because, going back to the beginning of our conversation, Dave, what did I do as a child? I was anchoring my morning newscast, and I'm like, maybe there's an opportunity for me to do some more of that in the coming years too.
Well, I'm excited about that. People can check it out at nardimediaacademy.com. Okay, so here's the point, Ashley, in every interview where I like to call out some action items. In particular, something that someone can do this week to use your example in their life. And if they can do that, then they'll make your success story a part of their success story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight 3 action steps that someone might do this week. I'm going to try and keep it simple so it's really concrete and actionable. And then what I'd like you to do is add 1 after that. Sound good?
You got it. All right. I love it. Let's go.
So the first one, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. Being successful in a career is about understanding your strengths. And part of your strengths is understanding the gifts that you were given, your natural upbringing, the people that you were around. So in Ashley's case, being around this success and having that kind of confidence, and me growing up around a father who's a radio talk show host, I'd like you to think about what are the gifts that you were given? What are the things that you learned growing up? And ask yourself, how can I use more of those in my career today? And ask yourself, is there something that I did know how to do or I have a gift to do that maybe I haven't been using fully in my career? Just give that some consideration and say, how can I make that a part of what I do? The second one, this is a big one from Ashley's story, is to allow yourself to grieve. Or even if it's not just grieving, allow yourself the time to process a large life event. Slow down. Reduce the expectations on yourself when this happens. Recently I went through the loss of my mom, which is a very complex thing because she was actually not a positive influence in my life. But I've worked with so many clients who have dealt with these issues, and I've seen the importance of slowing things down and lowering expectations for a certain period of time, months. So if someone's listening to this is experiencing that, give yourself some time. And then the last one, this kind of deals with working with moms and how your team is built around moms, and you're talking about providing flexibility to them. If you're a manager, if you're a leader, look for ways to provide more flexibility for your team and the people who work around you. And if you're not a manager, if you're not a leader, ask yourself, what's a way I can provide more flexibility to myself? And if you give yourself that room and give others that room, you're going to perform better. You're going to be more successful because you don't feel so constrained by rigid rules about when and how everything should be done. Ashley, what would you add as a possible action someone could take this week?
Well, first of all, Dave, I love all of these. I actually wrote them down. This like, what a great reflection on this conversation from today. The one that came up for me as you were talking is just for your listeners to just think about, and this has been part of my greatest life work in my 30s and now 40s of boundaries. So like I said, I explained that, I set this work boundary every day between 3:30 to 4, non-negotiable, because I want to go see my kids get off the bus. Is there anything that you can change in, like, to your viewers in their lives? Like, is there a non-negotiable on your schedule where you can take a break in the day and maybe go for a walk or have a conversation with a loved one and set that boundary, or maybe talk to your employer about it? Or if you're your own boss, like maybe creating that time and space and that boundary for you, that this is my time. I own this time, and making sure everyone knows that is your time where you're not available to the workplace. So that for me has been a game changer. Everyone knows, my clients know, my assistants knows, my team knows that 3:30 to 4 every day. And that for me is such a beautiful time to connect and be present for my family as they're coming home and transitioning. It's just changed everything for me. So thinking about boundaries and maybe some time that you can set just for yourself to fuel your cup. Don't forget to do that.
Wonderful. That's a great principle. Thanks for sharing that. And thank you, Ashley, for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed talking with you and hearing your story. Thank you for being a positive force for good in the world.
Thank you, Dave. This has been such a great conversation. Such a pleasure to be here.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. Remember, it's not so much about the stories that you heard or the things that you learned. What really matters is the action that you take. So go do something today. Go do something this week, and you'll make Ashley's success story a part of your success story. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw. and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Sound editing by Nick Wright. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for someone my dad might like to interview, please send it to guests@davecrenshaw.com. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time!